Lansing, Michigan convenience store employee Wanda Mason is found dead, having been shot at point-blank range. Investigators find that the entire murder has been caught on the store's videotape security camera. But the image of the killer is so degraded that it seems impossible to positively identify him, until old-fashioned forensic science and space-age technology come together to reveal the identity of the killer. Wanda Mason was a 48-year-old single mother of 3. In 1997, she settled with her children in Lansing, Michigan, and took a job at a convenience store gas station. About a year later, the owner decided to keep the store open 24 hours a day. Wanda Mason worked the very first overnight shift. Although the convenience store was located in a low-crime area, the owner of the store installed a security camera before the first overnight shift as a precaution. At 4:18 in the morning, a group of customers entered the store to pay for gas and found Wanda Mason in a pool of blood behind the counter. They immediately called 911, but by the time emergency personnel arrived, Wanda Mason was dead with a single gunshot wound to the head. A spent .22 caliber long shell casing was next to her body. Police were shocked when Wanda's 21-year-old son Donnie came into the store just moments after they arrived. He showed up before police notified the family. The cash register showed that Wanda Mason had been killed for $351. Strangely, Wanda told family just days earlier that she was not afraid to work the night shift because she had a plan in case she was robbed. Wanda told family members that if ever somebody robbed the store, she would not resist a robbery. According to her, she would just give them the money since it wasn't hers. "It's not my money. I'm not dying for it," she said. Police questioned everyone in the neighborhood and searched the store for clues. Police set up a perimeter and got a canine track going. A couple of blocks away, officers spotted a guy running down the road with a paper bag in his hand coming from the direction of the store. The man, a 20-year-old African American, was brought to the police station for questioning. When police examined the paper bag from the man found running away from the scene, they discovered it did not contain the stolen money, but candy, and he didn't have a gun. The man said he was running from the scene because, as a young African American, he feared he would be wrongfully arrested. Also, the image on the videotape, though degraded, did not look like the man, so the police had to release him. Without a suspect, police turned their focus on the security video taken from the store. But the video was designed in time-lapse mode, which is only 4 frames per second. The result is an unstable image, which was compounded by the fact that it was recorded on an old, badly degraded videotape. Police sent the tape to Ed Cheney at Future Media Corporation. According to Cheney, he played the videotape, and some of the pictures shifted and distorted, making the whole video sequence look unusable. But when he transferred the videotape to a broadcast video machine, he was able to isolate the good images from the bad. On the left-hand side of the screen, the tape shows a car pulling up to the store at 3:49 a.m. A man wearing a dark jacket enters the station and appears to be casing the area. He seems to notice Wanda Mason working in a back room. He then leaves without buying anything. 10 minutes later, the same man returns, this time with the hood of his jacket over his head. He goes straight to the back room, beyond the range of the security camera. At gunpoint, he forces Wanda to the front counter. She opens the cash register, and the man takes the money. He then steps back as if he's leaving. Trembling with fear, Wanda hides her face in her hands. Then the man puts the gun to Wanda's head and fires. He lowers his hood, walks out of the store, while stuffing the long-barreled pistol into his coat. 3 days after the murder, police released a composite drawing of the suspect to the press. Tips poured into the police station. But since the composite sketch was based on a scratchy videotape image, it was difficult to know which tips were relevant and which were not. And while police continue their investigation, they were also suspicious of Wanda Mason's son, Donnie Warren. They wondered why he was in the store in the middle of the night, just moments after the murder. Police discovered that Donnie Warren was unemployed with very little money. On the night of the murder, he was out drinking at a strip club. Police suspect that Donnie may have met the killer at the Topless Bar, where he and his buddies had been hanging out that night and spending money that they probably couldn't afford to spend. Knowing that his mother would not resist a robbery, that store may have seemed like an easy target, where they could hit the store, split up the money, and nobody would get hurt. Donnie denied having anything to do with his mother's murder. Police received a tip from a woman who said she recognized the police composite sketch of the killer on television. She identified the man as Ronald Leon Allen, her former boyfriend, who lived in the nearby town of Jackson. Ron Allen was a small-time criminal with prior arrests for assault and drug activity. His mugshot resembled the police sketch and the individual on the security camera videotape. Police found out that Ron Allen was a suspect in a shooting in Jackson, and that Jackson police had 2 .22 caliber shell casings from the shooting. Police took those shell casings and the shell casing that they found near Wanda Mason's body to the crime lab to see if they may have been fired from the same gun. Analysts said that the casings appeared to be from the same gun, but the only way to be sure was to test fire the actual gun for comparison, and police couldn't find it. Police also looked for a link between Ron Allen and Donnie Warren, but could not find any connection to the two, so police concentrate on Ron Allen. Police wanted to know the height of the shooter, so to find out, detectives went back to the store to recreate the murder, with graduated height charts set up around the store, and using the door and sunglass display as the reference points, a height test was conducted using the same security camera, set at the same angle, with the same framing that recorded the actual murder. Ron Allen was 5 foot 3 inches tall. When the test video was compared to the murder video, it showed that the shooter was 5 foot 4 inches tall. Ron Allen's mugshot was taken when Allen was only wearing socks. With shoes, Allen would stand 5 foot 4 inches. Ron Allen voluntarily agreed to take a polygraph test and failed. Since it wasn't clear enough to make a positive identification with the suspect, police sent the videotape images to Veridian, an image reconstruction firm that worked to repair the digital images from the Hubble Space Telescope. Then, investigators got a clean image, but the pictures were shot from a distance. In order to match the pictures to their suspect, investigators turned to forensic anthropologist Dr. Norm Sawyer. He applied a technique called photo-skull superimposition. He took the mugshot of the suspect Ron Allen and superimposed it over the image taken from the security camera. Dr. Sawyer was able to identify a mugshot of Ronald Allen as the perpetrator. Police also discovered that Ron Allen owned an Oldsmobile Cutlass that had been customized with expensive chrome wheels and a chrome rearview mirror. These same customized features could be seen on the vehicle outside the convenience store after electronic enhancement. Ronald Allen was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Taife returned to her apartment in Las Vegas in the early hours of the morning. She was ready to kick off her shoes and climb into bed after a long shift at a casino. But turning the key in the lock, Shauna had no idea there was someone hiding in her closet, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. When Shauna was inside, her assailant launched a terrifying attack. As she desperately tried to defend herself against the relentless blows of a claw hammer, she begged for her life. "Why are you doing this?" she cried, but she didn't stand a chance. The prime suspect was her estranged husband, George. He didn't want his marriage to be over, and he certainly didn't want the complications divorce would bring. But police had a problem. George had an alibi. Shauna, 46, loved her job as a cocktail waitress in the prestigious Palms Hill Casino, Las Vegas. It was there that she'd met and fallen in love with handsome George Taife. They married in Hawaii and had a child, a daughter named Madison. George was a highly regarded firefighter, and Shauna juggled work with being a devoted mom who had a smile for everyone. But by 2012, things between the picture-perfect couple were strained. Shauna told friends that George could be controlling. She also mentioned he'd paid a homeless man to do odd jobs around the house. She described the man as creepy. Shauna moved out and got her own apartment, sharing custody of Madison with George. She was sure her marriage was over. In early September, Shauna's apartment was burglarized. Her wedding ring was taken. Strangely, a pair of her bathing suit bottoms were taken. And strangest of all, the robber left something behind, a pair of boxer shorts size small. Then 3 weeks later, on 29 September 2012, Shauna was seen on CCTV clocking out of work at 3:01 a.m. Madison, then 8, was staying with her grandmother. Shauna drove the 30 minutes home and entered her apartment. A man attacked Shauna with a hammer. As she tried to defend herself, her fingers were broken. The man didn't stop until she was dead. The next morning, George picked up Madison and headed to Shauna's home. They walked in and found Shauna's body. George dialed 911. According to police, there were things done with the body that made them believe there was a possible sexual assault and that Shauna's body had been posed. In the scene, Shauna's purse, cash, and casino chips were missing. But strangely, some of Shauna's personal items were found inside a bag on a walking path near her apartment. As an estranged partner, George was the prime suspect, but when interviewed by police, he had an ironclad alibi. He'd been on a 24-hour shift at the fire station before picking up Madison. Then the police had a tip-off from a maintenance man known as Big Will, who said a homeless friend he knew by his nickname Greyhound had told him he'd killed a woman with a hammer, slamming it so hard it had broken. Greyhound was an ex-con called Noel Stevens. When he saw the reports about Shauna Taife's murder on television, Big Will knew he had to go to the police. He led officers to a grocery store often visited by Greyhound, who was then arrested for possessing drugs and taken in for questioning. Greyhound denied any knowledge of the murder, but mentioned to investigators that he lived in a tent in the desert. Knowing they had a slim window of opportunity with Greyhound detained, a search was carried out 8 miles from the Las Vegas Strip until investigators eventually found Greyhound's campsite. And there, under a shrub, lay a bloody pair of pants. Tests on the scene revealed that blood to be Shauna Taife's. Police also found a hammer, snapped in two from the attack, at the campsite and realized it had a barcode matching the hammer sold at Lowe's hardware store. After analyzing hundreds of hours from the surveillance camera, they found chilling footage of Taife and Greyhound smiling as they perused the aisles of the store before buying 2 hammers. That surveillance footage helped police make the connection between Taife and Greyhound and crack the case. At the station, Greyhound confessed to killing Shauna. According to him, he had made several dry runs as he prepared to kill her, even burglarizing her apartment one night. On his mobile phone was a contact called George. When asked who it was, he had a game-changing reply. "That's my friend, the firefighter." Noel Greyhound Stevens was the man George Taife had befriended, the man Shauna had been wary of. Records showed the pair had phoned each other constantly leading up to the murder. It soon became clear that Noel was in awe of George, and George had taken advantage of that to persuade him to kill Shauna. When police closed in on George just 9 days after the murder, he fled in his car and smashed it head-on into a barrier. It looked like a suicide attempt, but it failed. George was arrested at the hospital and charged, so was Noel. In 2013, Noel pleaded guilty to killing Shauna and agreed to testify against George to avoid the death penalty. George still protested his innocence. At the trial in 2015, George's defense was simple. Noel had confessed to killing Shauna. He was the killer. But the prosecution said that George had ordered the hit. He had called Noel 87 times in September, 5 times on the night before the murder. George had paid him $600 and promised a lot more to kill his wife. He'd even given him a key to get into the apartment. On the stand, Noel admitted breaking into Shauna's home 3 weeks before he killed her. When asked who had told him to make it look like a robbery, he replied, George did. Noel described killing Shauna. I hit her in the head, he said. When asked who told him to kill Shauna, he replied, George. When cross-examined, Noel admitted to hearing voices and hallucinating. Had he made up the whole thing? But one thing no one could dispute was the footage of George and Noel out shopping for hammers together. In September 2015, the jury found George guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. He was sentenced to life without. Peter and Joan Porco and their 2 sons Christopher and Jonathan lived on a modest oak-shaded suburban street in the town of Bethlehem, New York, a couple of blocks from the local high school. Bethlehem is a town where teen drinking is the biggest problem, and even a burglary is a rare occurrence. So when 52-year-old Peter Porco, a clerk in the Albany County Courthouse, failed to show up for a trial on November 15, 2004, court police, at the request of coworkers, went to the Porco residence to check on him. According to pre-trial testimony and interviews, police found Peter Porco immediately upon entering the house, lying in a pool of blood. Police reports and court records describe a macabre scene. It appears as if the gravely wounded Peter Porco had stumbled out of bed after being attacked, spraying blood across walls and on doorways. Peter Porco suffered 16 blows to his head from the axe and lost his jaw, and yet he got out of bed and went about his daily routine as though nothing had happened. It appeared that he tried to get dressed and used the bathroom, shaved, went downstairs and loaded the dishwasher, wrote out a check for his son's parking tickets, and made his lunch. He even went outside to collect his newspaper, got locked out, and used his spare key from under a plant pot to let himself in. Peter then collapsed and died near the front door, finally succumbing to his injuries. The coroner said that the blows to his head destroyed the part of the brain that deals with judgments, meaning that he was unable to assess what was going on, and his body went into autopilot, carrying out the steps he would normally go through every morning, completely unaware of what had just happened to him and his wife, or the condition of his body. The police and paramedics rushed upstairs and found Joan, lying in bed, her face disfigured and bloody. Police were amazed she was still breathing. Next to her, under the covers, was what police determined was the murder weapon, a firefighter's axe. According to Albany County paramedic Kevin Robert, he found Joan Porco on her back, left eye missing, jaw crushed, teeth missing, and head fractured in several spots from repeated blows from the axe. He said as he worked to save Joan's life, Bethlehem detective Christopher Bodish arrived in the room and began to try to question Joan. When questioned by police and paramedics, Joan appeared to nod affirmatively to repeated questions whether her son Christopher was the attacker. Based on Joan's responses, Christopher was identified as the #1 suspect. Joan was transported to the hospital where she reportedly slipped into a coma and underwent several operations on her face and skull. 3 weeks after the attack, Joan Porco regained consciousness. Despite originally identifying her son Christopher as the murderer, Joan then changed her mind and said she had no memory of the attack and believed her son was innocent. Joan went so far as to write letters to the Times-Union, asking police to go after the real killers. But police dig even more on the Porco's 2 sons. 23-year-old Jonathan was a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy, serving on a nuclear submarine hundreds of miles away. 21-year-old Christopher attended the University of Rochester, a 3-hour drive away. Both have an alibi for the night of the attack. Christopher was at the university the morning his parents were discovered, and while his fraternity brothers hadn't seen him the night before, another student did see him out jogging the next morning. The case appeared to have hit a wall, until investigators decided to check several campus security cameras. What they saw changed everything. Christopher had told investigators he never left campus, but prosecutor Mike McDermott says surveillance video shows Chris is lying. Caught on tape was Chris's bright yellow Jeep driving through a campus parking lot around 10:30 p.m., just hours before the attacks. At 10:36 p.m., the same yellow Jeep was captured by a surveillance camera on the roof of an off-campus medical center headed east. From this moment, prosecutors developed a theory for how they believe he committed the crime. At 10:45 p.m., New York State Thruway toll collector John Fallon thought he remembered handing a ticket to a young man driving a yellow Jeep with big tires. And at 1:51 a.m., another toll collector believes she may have seen a yellow Jeep driven by a young white male speeding into her lane at exit 24 in Albany. The Porco home is just 9 miles away from the exit. Prosecutors think Christopher got into the house by using a spare key that was kept under a pot in front of the front door. At 2:14 a.m., police believe Christopher deactivated the burglar alarm using the master code. Later, he smashed the alarm keypad in an attempt to hide that. The information is stored on a box in the basement, so smashing the keypad did nothing. Investigators believe Chris then grabbed an axe from the garage, crept upstairs, and savagely attacked his parents in bed. At 4:54 a.m., phone company records show that the phone line was cut. Before he left, he staged the house, so it appeared that an outsider was the one who entered and cut the phone line. Investigators found no signs of forced entry, and nothing was taken from the house. At 5:12 a.m., Christopher re-enters the New York State Thruway, heading back towards Rochester. And finally, at 8:30 a.m., a yellow Jeep is again captured by cameras on the roof of a medical center, headed back in the direction of the campus. To make sure it's really Christopher's Jeep, a video analyst ran the security camera images through a computer filter and found specific details on the Jeep, like mud on the passenger side door. The passenger side window had a torn parking sticker, and there was a political sticker on the back tire cover. Those were compared to photographs of Christopher's Jeep taken by police the day of the murder. Police identified that it was, in fact, Christopher's Jeep. According to court documents, Christopher faced a slew of problems at college, and that he had allegedly portrayed himself to fellow schoolmates as a jet-setting millionaire with oceanfront homes. But authorities believe Chris had become deeply involved in internet gambling and lavish spending, and had racked up more than $40,000 in debt. Chris reportedly began failing his classes, and in the fall of 2003 was expelled for poor academic performance. In January 2004, he registered at Hudson Valley Community College in Troy, New York. However, Chris's grades apparently did not improve, and he did not complete any of his classes for that semester. In August 2004, Chris forged a transcript from the community college showing that he had received all A's and B's and reapplied to the University of Rochester. To pay his tuition, Chris told his parents that he needed only a co-signed $2,000 loan. But after obtaining his father's relevant personal and tax information, Christopher Porco secured a $31,000 loan from Citibank. In November 2004, Peter Porco ran a credit check and discovered the $31,000 loan, as well as a $16,450 loan the son had forged in his father's name to purchase a yellow Jeep Wrangler in Florida. Police believe this was a deadly discovery for the unsuspecting father. The day after discovering the lone forgeries, Peter wrote an email to his son, threatening legal action against him. Several days later, Joan Porco wrote to her son and questioned his mental state. 7 days after that email was sent, Peter and Joan Porco were beaten with an axe in their home. On November 4, 2005, Christopher was charged with the murder of his father and attempted murder of his mother. He was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. Joan Porco frequently speaks to Christopher by phone and visits often. Cocktail waitress shot the possibility of parole. Noel also faced 2002. 40-year-old David Nixon, a successful realtor from nearby Grapevine, Texas, was reported missing by one of his ex-wives, Donna Lella, when their 10-year-old son had not heard from him after his baseball game. According to her, it was very unusual, and she also said David wasn't returning telephone calls either. Just a few hours later, a motorist spotted a fire in the parking lot of an abandoned building in Grand Prairie, Texas. When he got closer, he was horrified to see what looked like a human body. He immediately called the police. When police first arrived at the crime scene, the intense heat from the fire had damaged the body to such a degree that crime scene investigators had to spend hours delicately recovering the remains. An accelerant like gasoline was believed to have been used to set the fire. The victim, wrapped in a blue tarp and an electric blanket, was clearly a large white male with brown hair. Detectives believe that someone may have tried to stuff the victim's body down to a drainage ditch, and the body did not fit, so the perpetrator set it on fire to destroy potential evidence. Police found tire tracks and some fiber materials from an electric blanket, but little other evidence. The medical examiner would determine that the victim was a man in his 40s, killed by a single gunshot wound to the heart, but his identity was a mystery. Dental records later confirmed it was David Nixon. David's son testified that his father kept a handgun in the safe at his home. However, no gun or bullet was ever recovered, and tests showed his body had been soaked with gasoline before the fire. Despite the damage, the medical examiner was able to analyze undamaged tissue to estimate when David was shot. They estimate that at room temperature, David's body was probably deceased for 36 to 48 hours prior to the body being discovered. Since David's body was discovered Sunday night past midnight, he was probably killed either late Thursday night or early Friday morning. To investigators, it seems really strange that David's first ex-wife reported him missing just 3 hours before his body was found. The police soon learned she had a possible motive. David and Donna's marriage ended in 1995. After David had an affair with flight attendant Lisa Hill. They married and divorced within 2 years. And according to investigators, Donna would also benefit from David's $500,000 insurance policy until their young son came of age. But Donna had an alibi for Thursday night and Friday morning, the estimated time of death. And as the investigation went along, it was clear that the evidence did not point in the direction of Donna. David's second ex-wife also had an alibi for the time of David's murder, an alibi confirmed by numerous witnesses. Next, investigators questioned David's current girlfriend, 32-year-old Tracy Frame. Tracy said she last saw David on Thursday, and she assumed he was headed to Las Vegas, where he likes to gamble. Tracy consented to a search of the house she shared with David. Investigators then searched the home with luminol and did a search with cadaver dogs. They found no evidence of blood, and the cadaver dog didn't find anything either. But police recovered a control device for an electric blanket from Tracy and David's bedroom, but found no electric blankets in the residence. Which was kind of odd because they found David wrapped in an electric blanket. A day later, police found David's white Lexus abandoned in a supermarket parking lot within walking distance of their house. There was no blood or sign of violence in the car. One of the things they noticed was that the seat was pushed up toward the steering wheel, which would indicate that a much smaller person had been in it last, and not a big man like David Nixon. Police found out that after David and Tracy got together, David bought 2 matching cars, a black Lexus for Tracy and a white one for him. And because he owed back taxes to the IRS, David decided to place his house in Tracy's name, a decision he came to regret. David wanted to regain control of the house, and Tracy wanted to make sure that she kept the house in her name. An exhaustive search of the crime scene and a storm drain yielded few clues, as firefighters had already washed down the area. The police did find a set of tire tracks at the scene. The tracks were from a dual-axle vehicle, meaning it was a truck with 2 sets of tires on the back and 1 set on the front. Police analyzed the security video at the Tom Thumb supermarket parking lot where they found David's car. At 1:34 a.m., just 37 minutes before David's burning body was found, a woman got out of David's white Lexus, walked to a black Lexus, and drove away. 4 hours earlier, the black Lexus drove into the lot. The same woman got out, walked across the lot to a rental truck, and drove away. The tape showed that the previous afternoon, this same woman had parked the rental truck in the lot, then left on foot with a large black dog. Investigators said Tracy had a large black dog. Police also had surveillance video of the same woman walking into the store on the night David's body was discovered. The woman purchased garbage bags and 2 bottles of muriatic acid. In order to save 34 cents on her purchase, the woman used her discount card, and store records showed the name on the card was none other than Tracy Frame. After the purchase, she drove away in the rental truck. The rental agency told investigators that they had rented that same truck to 3 other people in the days after Tracy returned it. Investigators found no blood or trace of acid inside the truck, but the tire impressions were potential evidence. By laying the test impressions over the evidence photos, the analyst was able to compare all 6 tires on the truck to those found at the scene. This meant it was virtually certain Tracy's moving truck left these tire tracks. But one question remained. How does a woman Tracy's size move a guy that large? The answer: a hand truck came with the moving vehicle. Investigators believe that Tracy merely had to place the hand truck on the bed beside David and roll him over on top of it and strap him to it. Once David is strapped to the hand truck, then it's just a matter of pulling the hand truck around. Police believed that money was the motive. According to Tracy's friend Carol, Tracy was complaining about David one time, and that she told Tracy to leave him. Tracy said, "Well, without him, I'd be living in an apartment and driving a Honda." In March of 2005, Tracy Frame was convicted of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison. She will be eligible for parole in 2024. She will be 55. In 2006, at around 5:00 p.m., shots ringed out of Kooky Estilo Barbershop in Miami, Florida. 2 men were shot. One was transported to the hospital in critical condition. The other was dead. According to witnesses, the victim was in a barber chair, getting a haircut when 2 men grabbed him, yanked him out of the chair, at the same time pulling out their guns. They then took the victim outside where multiple gunshots were fired. The deceased victim was 23-year-old Jason Velez, father of a young daughter. He'd been shot once in the face. Police found 45 caliber casings near his body. The surviving victim, named John Carmona, was found inside the barbershop, shot 4 times, and in the hospital, and took them to the barbershop. She said they went to the barbershop to meet a 3rd friend, a man called Dominicano. When asked what's Dominicano's real name, she said she doesn't know, only describing him as dark-skinned. According to her, Dominicano, Velez, and Carmona went to confront another man at the barber shop. She says the man was threatening Dominicano. Police asked her if her boyfriend carries a gun. She answered yes. Detectives now believed the victim's two friends, Dominicano and Carmona, confronted the unknown man in the chair while victim Velez waited with a gun behind the shop. The two friends forced the unknown man in the chair out back. Shots were fired, leaving Jason Velez dead. They asked Velez's girlfriend if she knows the unknown man, but she doesn't know, only describing the man as white, not that tall, with lots of tattoos. She also said that she saw a brand new looking white Maxima car leaving the scene. Police went to search for the unknown man, checking everyone with tattoos in both arms, neck, back, and chest, and driving a brand new white Maxima car. The next day, officers pulled over a man fitting the unknown man's description. The man's name was Jose Enrique Rosado. Police asked Rosado if he was at Cookie Estilo Barbershop the time of Jason Velez's murder, and he initially denied being there at all. Then police told him about the surveillance video, and Rosado finally cracked. Rosado said he was in the barbershop getting a haircut when two men came up and snatched him out of the chair, punched him in the face, and tried to put him through the glass window. According to him, Dominicano then pulled out his gun as he and Carmona were bringing him out. According to him, he panicked and went to fight for his life. He said he pulled out his pistol and shot Dominicano, but he got away. Then he turned around, shot Carmona, who was holding him instead. He said once he shot Carmona, Velez came around the corner. Exchanged shots were fired between them, and Velez died. Rosado said after that he just ran. Police believed he was telling the truth, as everything fits perfectly against the evidence they gathered. The next morning, suspect John Carmona has recovered enough to speak with detectives. He said he got a phone call that there's some idiot out there trying to jump Dominicano. Carmona says he and Velez went to the shop to back up Dominicano, and that he asked Rosado what the F is the problem. Then Dominicano yoked Rosado off of the barber chair. He grabbed him by the neck, shoved him against the glass door. He then opened the barbershop's back door when Dominicano and Velez pulled out their guns. Rosado fired back. Police now know that Dominicano, whose real name is Joel Lantigua, was the one who started everything and asked Carmona his address. He immediately told them where he is. According to police, Jose Rosado will not be charged with the murder as he acted in self-defense, but will arrest him with possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. John Carmona and Joel Dominicano Lantigua were charged with felony murder in the death of Jason Velez. Police went to search for Dominicano in the address given by Carmona, but could not find him. After a fruitless search, police believe when Lansing